And welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 106. Today we're going to be talking about the idea of photo competitions, more specifically, I suppose, online photo competitions, although we will kind of cross over a little bit with others, and how our photos can seem to do really well in one contest and just disappear without a trace in another. Why is that? Why is it sometimes photos which you think that photo really isn't as good as mine seems to be doing much better? Some things are obvious, some things we will never know, but I am going to take you through some of the more obvious things and a couple of things that you might not have thought of before. I did a little bit of this, but it was well over a year ago, and that's a long time for a lot of people to remember, and of course some new people have joined us and won't remember that either. So I thought it was probably a good time to revisit this idea of photo competition, specifically the kind of online photo sites like PhotoCrowd, which I know quite a few of the regular viewers here attend, but also things like Guru Shots, Viewbug. There are a number of different sites. There are even curated sites like One Island and OneX.com where they don't have competitions, but if you actually want to get your images published on their site, you're really up against it, and they all have very specific ways of doing things. So that ultimately is what we're going to be talking about today. So here we are live on YouTube, unless you happen to be watching the recordings. all the podcasts are recorded live on YouTube. They're recorded to YouTube, and you can go to youtube.com/Kim Ayres. You can find all the backlog here. We're on episode 106, there's 105 to dive into. And if you haven't done already, do make sure you sort of click down there and subscribe and click the little bell thing to make sure you're notified of future ones as well. So, as I say, right at this moment, as I'm presenting this, we are live here on YouTube. So let me know you're here. Leave a note in the comments, say hi, tell me where you're from, tell me what the weather's like. I can see we've got a few comments already got a few people in. April says, hello everybody from a sunny Long Island, New York. Karen says, good afternoon from Shipley in Yorkshire. Meg says, hello everyone. That's my daughter, and I know she happens to be just downstairs. JG says, hi everyone, sunny here in the Cotswolds. Welcome JG. May Britt from good afternoon from Denmark. Maggie says, that's my wife, currently in the kitchen next door, says, hello everyone from a sunny Castle Douglas in southwest Scotland. Diane says, lovely sunny Warwickshire here. Rosemary says, good morning all from a sunny and frosty western Washington. Looks like sun seems to be the call of the day around the world. Stacey says, good morning all, a sprinkle this morning. Oh well, maybe not. Supposed to get sunshine this afternoon. I spoke too soon. Not hot, but springtime weather in the 60s. That'll be Fahrenheit, I hope, and not Celsius. Roy says, greetings everyone from West Yorkshire, and Nurije says, hi everyone from sunny Exmouth. That's great. So we have people in, we have people here. So this is superb. So what we're going to be doing is, like I say, talking about competitions. Well, I should say at this point, in the second half of this, I also have 4 images up for critique as well. So we're going to be looking at a few images sent in about that, giving a little bit of feedback. And of course, don't forget to stick around to the end when I'll tell you what we're up to next week as well. Also, and of course, there will be the question of the week, which I put into the Facebook group earlier. If anybody happens to be on Facebook but hasn't joined already, there is go to Facebook, type in Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, and you will find the Facebook group and join us. It's a place where you can submit images for critique or just kind of get involved in a general chat with some of the other regular viewers and contributors to this podcast. Right, okay, so let's make a start. Let's have a little talk about this notion of online competitions or photo competitions in general. I mean, there's a bit here which is at a very kind of fundamental level. We do photography, we take up photography, we take photos, we every now and again we take something, we think, oh, that's pretty good, I like that, I'm quite pleased with that. We maybe shove it up on social media. These days, that's the thing to do. You have an Instagram account or a Facebook account of some kind. You put your image up and people go ahead and like it. And somehow we kind of can't help ourselves. We kind of get caught up by judging how good our photo is by the number of likes we get, because there's sometimes we put up an image and we get 3 or 4 likes. Sometimes we put up an image and we seem to get about 20 or 40 or 100 likes, and we've got no real idea why we got some kind of likes rather than others. And it's important to remember at this point, though, that when you're talking about social media, especially if you're talking about a site like Facebook, it's a social thing, and by and large the photos you will get the most likes on have got nothing to do with the quality of the photo. They are all to do with how social they are. So for example, I've talked before on these podcasts about the fact that I can stick up my, what I consider to be my greatest ever photo. I have spent months in the planning, hours and hours in the creation, days in the editing, finessing it to the ultimate level that I can. I put it up on Facebook and I get 20 likes. I stick up a quick selfie of me and my daughter having a hot chocolate and I get 250. Is that quick selfie of me and my daughter a better photo than the one I spent months in putting together? Technically, no. Socially, yes. Everybody prefers the idea on a social media site. They want to know about me having hot chocolates with my daughter. That's an easy like. It's an easy click. So the problem is also, what this means is when we put up a photo of something that we thought we quite liked, people will click like on Facebook, but are they clicking like because it's a good photo, or are they clicking like because they want to be supportive? They're trying to, they don't know anything about photography particularly, but they know that you like it. So they're sort of saying things are nice. So this is kind of the tricky bit. How do you, if you are getting into photography, how do you start improving your photography and knowing whether your photos are any good? Because we all have this problem that we have photos which we absolutely love and we think these are great, but they just don't get the response we want. So what a lot of us do, sooner or later, we find these online sites like PhotoCrowd, Guru Shots, Viewbug, and a few others. I mention these ones more often because they're the ones that I happen to sort of go on as well. But the thing is that again, we sometimes run up against this problem that we have a photo that we think is quite good, but it just doesn't really score highly. And the photos that we were almost dismissive of, kind of throwaway photos, suddenly we're scoring well, and we don't really know why. And it's a tricky thing to kind of get. Now, part of the whole aspect of the critique section of these podcasts that I've been doing for the past 2 years is to help you get into understanding how to improve your photo. And improving your photo is very often about understanding the narrative, the story that you are trying to communicate, but it can also be a technical thing. Have you got the right settings on the camera that you want it to have? It can be compositional. Is the horizon straight? Do you have lines leading the eye to where they want to go? So and also things like lighting, because you change the lighting, you dramatically change the impact of your photo. So there's things like this. There's the technical, the compositional, the narrative side and the lighting side of photography. And these things will all give you a better photo, a better quality photo for certain. But then how does that work when it comes to an online competition? Or pretty much for that matter, any competition, whether you're going for your local camera club, you're going into the state fair, you're printing stuff up and trying to sell it to a local gallery. Now, the main thing to remember is you have to understand, first of all, whenever you put your photo into a competition or in front of anybody else, who is judging it? Are these people professional photographers? Are these people not necessarily professional photographers, but professional curators, like magazine editors or gallery owners? Are they enthusiastic amateurs? They're not professionals, but they do study photography a lot, like kind of camera club, or quite a few of the people who come on these podcasts. We love our photography. Or are they just pretty much non-photographers? Are they people who just occasionally whip out their phone, go click, go, that's quite nice, but they're never really going to do much more than that? And each of these people has a different way of looking at photos. So it's really important to understand that the who is looking at your photo is going to dramatically change the results of how well that photo is going to do. And I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail about that as we go along. Another aspect of this is where. Where is it being displayed? Because we look at photos in a different way to, if it's on PhotoCrowd, to say if it's on 1x, that each of these different online sites has a different agenda. There's also a difference between, no, I'll come on to that bit. So the who's looking at it is also going to affect the where it's going to be, the where it's going to be is also going to affect who's looking at it. So the who and the where, and then there's the how. The how is it being displayed? Because again, you look at a photo differently if it's on your phone and it's only this big, or if it's printed up, framed up, stuck on the wall, or if you're looking at it on a big computer screen. Each of these things is going to affect how you see the photo, and therefore how you judge it and the way you come at it. And as such, how anybody is going to be looking at these photos. So, this is the really important aspect, or these are really important aspects to understanding how your photo is going to be seen, how your photo is going to be judged, and therefore how well you are going to rank in any particular competition you've gone for. So, let's try and take this into a little bit more of a practical kind of thing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some couple of different sites and the way things are done. Okay, so what's the best way of talking about this first? Let's say then let's go for something like PhotoCrowd and Guru Shots. I'm going to concentrate for a moment on these two sites. Actually, I'll tell you what I'll do. Before I get to that, what I'm going to do is I'm kind of running alongside this. I'm going to show you some photos that I find for myself do well or don't particularly do well in contests, just so that you kind of get a better sense of what it is I'm actually talking about. So, for example, there are some photos, like if you take this one, which is, for me, I consider, one of my best photos. This one, and similarly, this one. These two here, they took a huge amount of planning, they took a huge amount of staging, they took a huge amount of working out how to do the lighting, getting people involved, and then editing it and polishing it up and what have you. Now, these photos look fantastic when they're printed up. These photos do particularly well in competitions where they are curated by either other photographers or curators, experts in, people who are involved in visual imagery all the time. These ones have won first in things like PhotoCrowd. This one, I think I actually even won a prize of a really good camera bag once. Similarly with this one, and yet, whereas actually on PhotoCrowd they do reasonably well, on Guru Shots, no, they don't really do particularly well. Why is that? Now, part of it comes down to the way images are viewed on these online sites. When you're looking at one of these kind of online sites where there's a lot of photos and you're involved in the judging process, you're looking and you have to judge, you start scrolling through them at high speed. Now, if you're on PhotoCrowd, you have to, and you're voting, I think it's like you need to vote for a minimum of about 50 photos. When you're voting on Guru Shots, you have to vote for a lot more, and you're also presented with a lot more. Now, again, on PhotoCrowd, when you're voting, you can look at them one at a time, and each time you vote, the next picture crops up. In Guru Shots, you have a whole pile on the screen, and you go select, 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 select. So generally speaking, on PhotoCrowd, you take a little bit longer to decide on whether an image is worth voting for. Whereas on Guru Shots, you take far less time. And this actually then has an impact on the way people are seeing photos. So when you've got a photo like the ones I just showed you, where they take a little bit of time to work out what's going on, you need to kind of study them a little bit. But if you do, you're rewarded for studying them. They tend to do better on PhotoCrowd. But when you're scrolling at high speed through the images, and anything that takes a little bit of time to work out what's going on, boom, just gets missed. Nobody's taking the time. Nobody's spending more than about 1/5 of a second on any of the images. Consequently, what you need to do is, or what you notice is the photos that really tend to score highly are the ones that are simple, that don't have really any subtlety, the ones that tend to be maybe oversaturated or just really sort of hit you in the face. And another aspect of this is the size. If the picture is only this big, how does your photo look when it's this big? And if you can't really make out the detail in that big, then anybody who's scrolling through several photos at a time on the same screen is going to miss it. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So how your photo looks at a thumbnail size makes a difference for these kind of online competitions. So let's talk, okay, let's show you a couple more examples. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to run through, okay, so, I'm sorry, I've got several different things that are running parallel here, so bear with me while I try and work out. Okay, let's just straightforwardly run through some of the photos that do well in some that don't do in others. So if you've got car competition, this one always does really well. If I'm doing guru shots, I tend to score in the upper end with this one. Now, for me, is this a great photo? No, it isn't. It's a nice photo. This is James Bond's car. This is an Aston Martin DB4. So as a content, anybody who loves their James Bond, anybody who loves classic cars goes, wow, great photo, love this. And it's not a great photo. Now, this wouldn't score so highly in a car photo competition where people were really sitting and studying the photos, but it does in the fast one because people look at the content rather than the how well it's taken. By comparison, this one, another car on a street, this is a Jaguar XK140. Personally, I think this is a much better photo. I love the way the car sort of steers out. It's catching the light, the reflections, the sun's actually hitting the shop window, which is casting the light back onto the car. It stands out against the background. There's a nice kind of curve and shape to it. I personally think this is a much better photo. Maybe part of it I prefer this car, but the reality is the other photo, this photo, always consistently scores considerably higher than this one. And that's straightforwardly because I think more people like a DB4 than they do an XK140. Is that true? I don't know. Then there's things like on PhotoCrowd, I found something like this, a footpath post. That scores well. And I've never really understood why, to be honest. It's a photo. It's a photo. But I was looking for, there was something that talked about having letters, a competition for letters. So that had letters clearly on it. I put it in and suddenly it was scoring highly. I didn't win, but I was in it, that kind of top 10%, top 20% for a wooden post. Is it the greatest photo ever taken? No. But for some reason it does really well. Another one that does really well, pizza. It's a photo of a pizza. Now, it's a well-taken photo of a pizza, nicely lit, wooden background, but it's just a pizza. But again, online competitions, it does well. Would you print this up? Would you put it on your wall? No, not a chance. Would you buy it? No. However, you might buy the pizza. And it's this idea, this thing that people sort of look at the content and go, I like the content. And then if you can combine I like the content with it's reasonably well taken and it's in focus and the composition's okay, you actually have a much, much higher starting point of it, or a much higher chance of actually winning, or if not winning, at least scoring highly. Let me close a couple of those. Got a couple of, just noticing a couple of comments coming in. Oh, April saying you're right, Kim. Stacey's very true. Diane saying agree. Subha says agree. Nurije saying couldn't agree more. And Stacey saying you're right about the straightforward shot is much better. So this is what you kind of end up with, is that it's anything that requires a bit of subtlety, a bit of study, is likely to get missed. Now, okay, let me show you another couple that tend to do really well. Nice and colourful, can't go wrong with a flower. Tulip, backlit. Now, again, it's a well-taken photo, great, but it does massively better than my stage scenes. Because it's an easy like. It's an easy like. It's there. You've got a nice, and then there's a nice little echo with a different colour in the background. Or another one scores highly, this one. Now, actually, with this one, I experimented with this. I have the original photo doesn't look hugely. I mean, it's this-ish, but this is edited. This is oversaturated. I have boosted the colours. I have subtly shifted the colours so that the greens in the back here are almost blue shift. I've strongly emphasised the yellow of the fallen leaves here, and of course really boosted the pinks of this as well. And again, if you were to print this out and stick it on the wall, it would be garish and a little bit hideous. But when you're talking about it looking about 2 inches in size on a screen, it's an instant like. It's an easy like. It's simple. People know what they're looking at, and it scores particularly well. Or let's try something else here. A rose. Here's an original photo of a rose, a white rose, and I've edited it up, and it's okay. I then did I did a gradient. It's purely put a gradient map of red and black onto that rose. From that to that. This one scores 2 to 3 times better than this one. And again, what you'd really, even though this is, that's not a natural red rose, that is a coloured rose in Photoshop. But if you are scrolling through at high speed, it's a burst of red. You notice it, you catch it, right? Now, I'm going to show you one last thing I want to show you here with regard to this kind of thing. Is very, very recently, I mean, like as in last week, Guru Shots had a competition, and it was just a photographer of the week. You had to stick in photos that had been taken within the last week, and you put in 4 photos. And so I put in I can't remember what the other 2 photos were. One of the photos I put in was this one of my father, which I was talking about in last week's podcast. So, black and white, portrait, you take the time to study it, you look into his eyes. My father is 85. Still a huge amount of life in there. Obviously, I have a personal connection here, so this will always be a more meaningful portrait to me than it will be to you. But I think as portraits go, it's got a depth to it, and it's certainly got one of these depths whereby if you take a little bit more time to really study it, you're rewarded for doing so. Now, in my little 4-pack of images on Guru Shots, this got, I think it was 638 votes. Now, my highest score out of the 4 images that I put in, without using a boost or anything, which got 1,000 and something like 85 votes, so almost double, not far off double the votes, was this one. It's a cat in a window. Now, this one was a literal snapshot. I was out doing a photo shoot with a client. We've been mostly shooting inside the house. We were taking a little look around the house to see if there was a couple of places to do a shot outside. I noticed the cat in the window. Part of my brain went, oh, Guru Shot seems to like cats in window. I just went click. I then tidied up a little bit, edited in Photoshop. And suddenly, this is a massively high-scoring image. It's a cat in a window. To me, this is an absolutely so what photo. I wouldn't push this. I wouldn't promote this as a, hey, come to Kim Ayres and get a photo of your cat. It's okay. I followed all the rules. It's in focus. The composition is fine. but there's no substance to it. Not like this. This is a photo of substance, and yet this one scored almost twice the amount of points in the same competition. Now, this isn't an opening for me to just go, blah, 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 life's shit, or unfair. It's about trying to point out to you why or how votes are different. And going back then to this notion of who's looking, when you are talking about these crowd votes, not only do you need simple, what you've got to understand is most of the people who are on these sites, most of the people are on something like Guru Shots, and there are tens of thousands. When so you go in for these competitions and there are tens of thousands of entries. Usually between 10 and 20,000 people will enter. So if you get top 100 or you even get top 10%, you are really doing well to score up there with these things. Now, are all those people really enthusiastic camera photographers? No, a lot of them are just kind of playing at it. They've got their phone, they take quick photos, they shove them in for competitions. So the non-photographer, really, the starting out, they don't know enough about photography to be able to judge a photo by its technical or its emotional or its compositional quality. They judge it by the content. Oh, there's a picture of pizza. I like pizza. Click. Oh, there's a picture of a bright colourful tree. I like bright colourful trees. Click. There's a pretty flower. Click. There's a cat. Click. It's about the content. Do you like cats? Do you like dogs? If you prefer cats, you will click a like on a cat, no matter how naff the cat photo is and no matter how well constructed the dog photo is, people will click on the cat if they prefer a cat, and vice versa. So it's not about your skill as a photographer, it's about your understanding that that's how people will do it. So if I want to be in Guru Shots and I want to score highly and I want to play the game, then I need to understand that to play the game, the photos that are going to do best are going to be simple. They will look fine when they're only 2 inches big. They don't take any kind of thought or investment. They don't take any investment from the viewer in order to understand them. And that's a really, really important thing to understand. Now, depending on where you're doing these. Now, if you go to PhotoCrowd, like I say, PhotoCrowd, I would say slightly more discerning. Now, the other thing is where competitions with with Guru Shots will have between 10 and 20,000 entries. PhotoCrowd typically has between 500 and 2,000. Occasionally, they do ones which have about 4,000, but mostly it's between about 500 and 2,000 entries. So first of all, you're not up against the same level of competition. Secondly, like I say, people tend to be looking, rather than scrolling through massive photos on the screen, they tend to be looking at one photo at a time and scrolling through and voting. So they get a little bit more, so a slightly better taken image is going to show up a little bit. It doesn't just have to be the thumbnail. So you tend to find, but PhotoCrowd isn't immune to it. And the other thing is then, imagine that you were going to a competition that was real world rather than online, so you were going to have to print this up. There are 99% of the photos that are on these online sites wouldn't get anywhere. Even the winners wouldn't get anywhere if you actually had to print it up, because the quality is so poor. It would look fine at this big, but if you blew it up to 1 meter wide or even a foot wide, it would be pixelated, it would be garish, it would be over sharpened, it would be over contrasted, it would be oversaturated, and it would just look a mess. What you can get away with on a little screen, you cannot get away with if you're printing it up. So that becomes a really important thing to understand, that the way these photos are being judged is depending on the device or the way it's being looked at, where it's being looked at, and who's looking at it. And if you can get a sense of that, that's going to dramatically change how you present your photos into different competitions. Now, there's an interesting comment here. Okay, look, I'll sort of just see a couple more here. April says animals always get better scores than people on average. Absolutely they do. Maggie says, yeah, cats seem to rule the world. April says, yeah, they're just cuter. To which Nurije has put a couple of laughing emojis. Stacey says dogs and cats always get attention, cuteness. And this is true. If you, I've often said if I wanted to do really well in social media, I should give up doing portrait narrative photography and take up photographing kittens. Kittens, puppies, babies, these things are guaranteed for lots of likes. Are you necessarily going to sell as many if you're trying to make a business out of it? Probably not. But in terms of getting status online, I will probably do a lot better. Now, this is the bit that I wanted to say. Because Royce now says colour always does better than black and white. And this is a really true and obvious point. A point to make. So it's one to understand. And not just colour does better than black and white, but landscape does better than portrait. And what I mean is I don't mean in terms of genre, I mean in terms of widthways, that style, landscape style photos do better than portrait mostly. Now, to illustrate this point, I actually this morning, I went to PhotoCrowd and I just randomly picked on 10 of the most recent contests. And what I found was out of the last 10 that I randomly chose on PhotoCrowd, 8 of the winners were in landscape format. 1 was in portrait, 1 was square. Right? So 1 square, 1 portrait, 8 landscape. So that was a random, and very typically on PhotoCrowd you will tend to find that. You might get more portrait in PhotoCrowd because people will often be looking at them at a bigger stage when they're in the voting process. 1 was black and white in PhotoCrowd. Now, Guru shots, by comparison, out of the last, I randomly went to the 10 most recent Guru shots winners pages, and pretty much, well, all the winners, 10 were in landscape, none were in portrait, none were square, 1 was black and white. And the only time black and white tends to do better than colour in these is if you're doing portraits. For some reason, if the competition is called portraits, then black and white portraits tend to do slightly better than colour. The other thing with black and white portraits is you either need a young woman or an old face. Women tend to do better than men, unless it's a very old face, like a kind of person in their 80s or 90s plus. And generally speaking, somebody middle-aged or from between 30 and 60 isn't going to get a look in. Again, there's a content thing with this. People either want to look at pretty young things or they want to look at the interesting old. Now, the thing about landscape and the thing about colour, what I want to do is I'm going to illustrate something here. Actually, sorry, let's just a couple more comments just come in. Oh, Rosemary said, would you be able to do a podcast episode on how to get our photos ready to print out well? That's a really interesting idea. What I would ask you, Rosemary, is can you email that to me? Because right now I'll get to the end of this and I'll completely forget that I've talked about it. Please email me that suggestion. That's a good one, and I'll put it into the list of possibilities for the future. So thank you. And JG says, I find my photos do better on PhotoCrowd if they are judged and voted for in the competitions. I do a lot of dark black and white shots. They don't do that. That don't do well on PhotoCrowd. Yeah, so back to this notion then. Black and white aren't doing as well as colour. Portrait don't do as well as landscape. And I want to show you essentially why that's going to happen. So what I did again this morning, I just to kind of make it a little bit easier, I went and took some screenshots of Guru Shots page, and I'm going to show you here. These are off. This is off my own profile page, but I want to show you kind of the way that this is being viewed on my computer screen. Okay, so here's one, here's another, here's another. Now, what I want to say is when you glance quickly, especially those of you who are watching this on smaller devices like tablets or even phones, what grabs your attention straight away? And what grabs your attention, I would guess, is you've got a bright orange up here, you've got a bright yellow here, you've got a bright orange here, and you've got a bright pink here. Those are the first ones that grab your attention. If we go on to this one, what grabs your attention? It will be straight into the middle here because we've got this bright white patch, which happens to be next to two darker ones, plus there's a face. And also next to that, we've got flames. Flames, bright. So we've got a strong contrast grabbing our attention here. And if I go to this one, what grabs your attention? Well, there's a bright red rose up here, there's an orange down here. Now, to really get this point across, what I'm going to do, let me just open this with Photoshop, and I'm going to use an old trick that I've done before to show people about composition. So here's the screenshot. Now, I'm going to duplicate that layer, and I'm going to blur this layer. Okay, so I'm going to go to Filter, Blur. Oh, sorry, not blur, Filter, Gaussian Blur, I think is, or Gaussian Blur, depending on where you're at. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to nudge this up and to get to a point whereby we can now no longer really see what it is. And then, just to really, I'm going to edit, transform, rotate 100 degrees. Okay, now the point of that is that at this point, having blurred it and rotated it, and well, you might remember that the red was the rose, but you're now going to be struggling to try and remember what anything else was. And that's really the point, is I want you to what stands out to you on this page? What grabs your attention? And the first things that grab your attention, quite simply, let's look at the little pencil tool here. Do a new layer. This grabs your attention, and this grabs your attention. Okay? After that, this is kind of grabbing your attention a bit because there's a dark patch against a lighter background. And there's a kind of light patch here, but we're not really sure what it is. But if you think about it, this is the way the eye is getting drawn. And if you are moving at relatively high speed, if you're trying to take in several photos at the same time and you're scrolling through them at the same time, what's grabbing the attention? Okay. Now, let's flip back to here. So what was grabbing the attention was the orange, the rose, that dark against a bit of light is actually this one here, which is, but the thing is that got slightly confusing because actually that was only showing up dark because it was lighter here and lighter on the other side. So where that picture appeared in the, next to, I mean, if this one had been sitting next to the red rose, you wouldn't have noticed it at all. Now, what we do notice is there are certain photos, like this one. Oh, sorry. So we go to this one here. Say if the woman in her high heels trying to walk through the snow. It's a fun wee photo, that. Is it noticed? Absolutely not. It's black and white and it's portrait. We've got another portrait one here. Sunbeams coming through the forest, highlighting onto a little birch beech, beech with just the autumn leaves left on it. That one never does very well. Now, this one, sunlight coming through the thing, tends to do much better, but it's in landscape format. So this one will always do better than this one. Again, if we take a look at the layout of this, if you notice, landscape pictures take up much more space of the part of the screen. Portrait, percentage-wise, take up a much smaller part of the screen. So landscape, you're immediately getting a chance for people to see more of the photo. And then if you've got the bright colour, or the it makes it that much easier to grab the attention. And then if we're talking about simplicity, something like this one, if there's a competition called Orange, then you have a photo of an orange that is looking orange. This one does reasonably well. Surprise, surprise. In a competition called Orange. More so than, say, this one. This one does fine for still life, and this has an orange in it, but it's got lots of other things in it. So if I've got a thing called Orange, and I put in this one and this one, it's this lower one that will do better. Even though that one on the still life one is the better photo. So I hope that's kind of making sense to you. Let me just close that. So that's really wanting to try and kind of get across that point of how people are looking. And if people are looking in these kind of, fast turnaround sites, they're not giving much attention. You have to be obvious. It has to work at a small scale. Anything that's subtle, anything that requires input from the viewer isn't going to get chosen. Okay. What's that? April says, I would hang your still life one up in my home. Love that one. Oh, that's kind. Thank you. But you see, the difference is with that one is designed to look good as a print. It's not designed so much for online competitions. JG says, that makes sense. Would never have thought of it like that. Excellent. Glad that the thought's getting across. Now, I'm going to compare this a little bit to, there's a couple of other sites online which are curated sites. So things like 1X and One Island. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to flip over to the gallery page on these. So let's sort of see what we've got here. So this is 1X, right? And here's their front page gallery. So these, now the thing is with 1X and One Island, which I'll show you in a minute, is they are curated sites. You sign up, you become a member. There's an immediate little thing there saying, try 1X for free. I'll just click no thanks for the moment. And these are curated. So this means they have select people who select the images. These are not crowd voting. And consequently, the style and the quality tends to be better. So here we've got now, you might or might not like some of these, but generally speaking, there's a little bit more in the kind of quality that tends to be there. Thought and technicality, narrative, style have gone into these. And some of these we know would work well on some of the crowd voting sites. Some of them wouldn't. I mean, that one being portrait. On I can almost guarantee on Guru Shots, this one would just get overlooked almost instantly. This one might or might not, quite nice minimalist, but again, because the car on there, again, if you think about looking at this 2 inches big, you're not going to notice. This is playing around with a bit of subtlety. Some of them will work better than others, but they're not all automatically going to work well from one site to another. Another site is One Island. Now, One Island is also a very curated site. Like 1X, probably less than 5% of the photos that are submitted to it are likely to be chosen to be actually put on the site. Now, you might or might not, again, you might or might not like the actual photos. There will be some you will like, some you won't. But one of the things about these is that they all, especially on One Island, they all have a very highly polished look. There's a lot of photographers who, who work in advertising, editorials and what have you, who place themselves on this site. You get a lot of conceptual stuff, as well as, and whilst not all these are actually square photos, they're presented as square, which can kind of mess you up a little bit sometimes. I've got a few photos on here which aren't square, and then what happens is the ends get chopped off and you lose you lose some of the what you were actually trying to do. But you can see here that there's a quality that is not just go out and take a photo. These are really edited to within an inch of their lives. They are polished, and they have a very particular, there's a sort of particular kind of look and feel which isn't going to suit your average amateur photographer. So as you can see, it's a very, very different kind of thing. Then I'm going to just briefly go on to lens culture here. Lens culture does a whole bunch of different competitions, but they have teams of people, teams of judges, and these judges tend to be people who are photo editors in magazines, or in charge of the photography, or particular they are fully professional photographers. And so again, the kind of photos that win are not necessarily the kind of photos that would ever necessarily appear or work on something like a photo crowd type site. So let's just kind of enlarge that a little bit so you can kind of see. We've got this with, again, this kind of thing. You stare at it for a little bit, you start to get a sense of the story. It wouldn't work on guru shots. It would just get skimmed past without anybody realizing what it was. This kind of thing as well. I mean, again, there's a certain style of portrait which does well in these kind of competitions, which is what I tend to call melancholic stillness. You don't very rarely get anything where there's action involved or real engagement in that sense. So here they're sitting very. Now you can build story. There's a lot of narrative and there's ideas of narrative. Here are sort of various judge chosen ones. This guy with his back here, back to the camera, and the red headscarf becomes quite graphic. This one here with the three young lads looking like a bunch of bruisers who are going to be in a gang and beat you up. This one here, guys are standing in his swimming trunks, but he happens to be bald. It looks like he's probably got alopecia. Some of these photos don't grab me in the same way, but what the thing is that they have grabbed the jurors, the judges on this. And this is coming back to this idea of understand that the judges are looking for something very, very different. So when we talk about the likes of, first of all, you've got your non-photographer or very early starting out photographer, or people who are just whipping stuff out with their phone, but they don't really understand anything about photography. Mostly, this is broad brush stuff, and there will of course be exceptions, but mostly what tends to happen is people are choosing on content. They like a cat, they click a cat. They like a tulip, they click a tulip. They don't like a dog, they don't click on the dog no matter how well it's taken. Then you get on to those who've started learning about photography, and then they start clicking on photos that they kind of wish they'd take. So you see the beautiful sunset over, or you see a lone tree, which is rather, you see a bit of peeling paint coming, and you go, oh, this is the kind of thing I'm wanting to take, but this one's been taken a little bit better than I would, so therefore I like that. So you get into sort of things that are a little bit more photographic. By the time you get to being either a high-end amateur photographer because you've been doing this for years, or you're a professional, or particularly if you are at kind of picture editor status, you have seen sunset over smooth water 10 million times. You have seen lonely tree 10 million times. You have seen peeling paintwork 10 million times. You are sick to death of this. What you are desperately seeking is originality. You want to see something which is just going to make you go, oh. And you want to see something which is going to give you back something on your investment of the time you put into looking at it. And those then become really rare. But those kind of photos which take investment of time do terribly on the crowd voting sites. So hopefully, I'm really hoping that I'm kind of getting across here why the photos, and it means that really when it comes down to judging your photos, how good are your photos? You've got to also ask your question: how good are they? For what? For appearing on Guru Shots, for appearing on Photo Crowd, or for being judged by my peers, or because I want to print these up and be able to sell them, or because I want to enter them into a competition that's going to be judged by professional photographers. Each of these different judges has got a entirely different set of criteria. So that's why it can be really difficult to understand why your photo can do incredibly well in one competition, terribly in another. Okay, lots of comments coming in here. Let me see what else we've got here. Ditch Digger says, "Hi Kim, are the photo competition sites really worth it, and do they sell the winners for advertising without accrediting the photographer? I'm not familiar with the sites." No, generally speaking, the more reputable ones absolutely don't. They all have a thing which says somewhere in the terms and conditions that if you take the photo, you are the copyright owner. The problem with sometimes online sites is that there are certain unreputable people who just feel that if I go on the internet and grab an image, I can use it to advertise my stuff and I don't have to pay anybody royalties. They are in fact acting illegally. You as a photographer, if you took that photo, you have the copyright to that photo. Somebody can't go advertising it without first agreeing that with you. So if there's somebody is doing that, it's all completely illegal. Roy says, "You have to decide, do you want to do your own thing or do you want to sell your soul to the devil?" Well, it depends how much the devil's paying. No, there is a thing here of, yes, who are you trying to please? Are you trying to please you? Are you trying to please your peers? Are you trying to please some random strangers on the internet? Understanding that makes a difference. April is saying, to Ditch Digger, Photocrowd has real magazines that you can compete for. You can end up a magazine if you're lucky. Now, again, there's a little bit of controversy there. I will say, yes, sometimes magazines are running photography competitions in conjunction with Photocrowd, and so the winner gets printed in the magazine. And I have done this, and I have won, and I've been printed in magazines. Having said that, you can, if you want to put your cynical cap on, say the magazine is getting images to put in its magazine without having to pay for them. But it depends whether you feel my images should only ever be paid for, or whether I quite like the publicity, or whether I give a bit of kudos to me for doing that. So again, you can play around with that, but that's a discussion for another time, I think. And also, April says Nikon and Canon regularly have competitions for their magazines. Okay, right. So hopefully then that's giving you a big. I've spent a lot longer on this than I really intended to. I've still got a critique section I want to get through, so we'll move on at this point. So one of the things I would just like to say, just got a wee reminder: if you are finding these podcasts particularly useful, helpful, you feel like they are helping you to move your photography forward, or you're just finding them entertaining, or it's a nice way to while an hour on a Sunday afternoon, or Sunday morning, or Sunday evening, depending on which part of the world you are, then do please consider supporting these by going to buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres. Price of a coffee, a couple of coffees, a few coffees if you're feeling really generous. Always appreciated. Right, okay, now, in fact, actually, I got a lovely message from Diane recently. It said, "Thanks to your teaching, I've just made the top 25% award, coming in with top 17% with people from behind on Photocrowd out of nearly 3,000. That's lovely to hear. And I know once before Roy's also talked about a couple of competitions where he's edited things and improving. So this is all. Please tell me these things. That's a reward for me as well. It's nice to know that if the information I'm giving you is making a difference and you can physically feel the difference in the response to the photos you're getting, then that's brilliant. That's why I'm doing this. So do let me know your great stories. Okay, now, the next thing I want to do is just a brief chat here about question of the week. On my Facebook group, somewhere along here, it's, Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres on Facebook. I've quite often put in a question of the week. And this, I was curious. So I put in, with spring here in the Northern Hemisphere at least, coming to life, I put up a question saying, what is your favourite season to take photos? And I must say I had to force a couple of people to, because there was a few people who said, oh well, they all have their own specialities. I said, yes, I know they all have their own specialities, but which is your favourite? If you had to pick one. So absolutely twisting a few people's arms. What I found was for spring, we got Camerose Peter, May Britt, Stacey, Diane, Russ, Pat, Roy and Sophie. We had all responded and said they liked spring best. Summer, we had Jackie, Henry, Barbara and Nurije. And by the look of it, April is also saying, I love summer. So we've got April, so we've got 5 for summer. Autumn or fall over in America. We had Heather, Darren, John, Amanda, Catherine and Karen and Katie all said autumn or fall. So that's 7 for autumn. And winter, no one. No one seems to like winter. They're certainly not their favourite. So with that, I suppose spring seems to win, with autumn a close second and summer trailing in on third. JG's come in and said summer, still in third place, however. I thought that was kind of just a fun kind of interesting thing. So let's move on then to the critique section. So critique section, this is the part now whereby we've just been talking about how to get your, things to understand how photo competitions are done, but really, you still fine, you've got a picture of a kitten, the kitten's likely to do well. But if you understand composition, lighting, narrative, and technical stuff, that picture of that kitten can be so much better. So how do you find out how to improve your photography and where you could have got would have improved? So that's what the critique section is here for. So if you belong to Facebook group, you can go to the Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres Facebook group, stick your photo in for critique, or if you don't do Facebook, go to email me, kim@kimayres.co.uk, send me your image. Tell me what it is about the photo that you are struggling with, where your problem is, and I will do my best to try and give you some feedback and help with it. So photos now for this week. Actually, just before I get on to that, a couple more podcasts. Oh yeah, Maggie says, ultimately we have to be able to please ourselves with our creative work. We continually strive to learn because it matters to us, not just for the quick likes. Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. If we are creating, we have to feel good about what we are creating first and foremost for ourselves. Then, yes, it's great to get the praise from others, but we start off, if we're just creating stuff that we don't really like just to get the praise for others, it's unrewarding. When I get lots of likes for that cat, do I feel any sense of achievement? No, I don't. And that's really what Roy's comment earlier about selling your soul to the devil. If you are just purely chasing likes, and by doing so taking photos of stuff that you're not even happy with, then kind of what's the point? First and foremost, I think, yes, you have to be kind of doing something which is going to reward yourself. What else have we got? Oh, Diane says it's down to your podcast. Thank you. I'll allow myself a smug moment. But it's not just my podcast. I'm hugely glad my podcasts are making a difference. But it is also down to you. I do these podcasts every week. Some people listen, some people don't. Some people take on board, some people don't. Some people they don't have to take on board. It's not necessarily a judgment. But if you are taking on board what I'm saying, applying it, trying it, and you're finding you're improving, then a lot of that is down to that is down to you to putting it into practice. So allow yourself a smug moment too. Right. Oh, Stacey says winter is bleak unless you get a really good snowstorm, but that's it. Yeah, I kind of know what you mean there. Okay, so let's move back onto the critique section. So today then, I'm afraid I'm going to have to rush through these a little bit. Let's start with Subha. So Subha has sent in this one, said it's an abandoned staircase corner, the way to a terrace whose door mostly remains closed. I was somewhat fascinated by the damp wall and couldn't resist to take this shot. I did some editing for highlighting the intricate pattern on the wall, which was severely damp and moist. Please let me know of your opinion and how I might have could have done this any better. Okay, so interesting shot. We've got an old building, stairwell going up. We've got this patterned effect on the wall. So that's the starting point. What could have been done differently? So I think part of the thing to remember here, first of all, Subha, I would say, good on you for noticing it. Part of the developing your photographer's eye is to sort of look around and go, what is it that's grabbing my attention? And this grabbed your attention. However, we run into a couple of things. Well, one of the things I do like about this is I like the nice strong diagonal that comes down from the side, but the thing I would say that first of all is happening is what's grabbing all the attention is this bright light patch down the bottom. Now, what you've said in your writing is that what really was grabbing your attention was this amazing sort of patterning on the wall. But when I look at this photo, the first thing that grabs my eye, remember it's exactly the same as we did with the whole screenshot thing, is it's the bright patch. So let me just show you what I mean by that. Let's just open that in Photoshop for a moment. And again, what I will do, I will, let's filter, let's blur that in the same way we blurred the other one. Let's up that blur a little bit more so we can't really, and then just to make sure that we know what we're looking at, let's just rotate that image 180 degrees. So it's not now clear what it is we're looking at. The question then is, what do we see? And again, what we see is this bright patch here, this bright patch here, and maybe what we're also noticing is a dark streak on a light patch there, a dark streak on a light patch there. These are the bits that are grabbing our attention. Light patches and the dark streak against the light patches. Then we might notice, oh, there's a kind of slightly interesting colour over here. I wonder what that is. Now, go back and compare that to here, and let's just turn that back the right way round. And actually, this little bit of blue down here isn't really part of your main picture. It's like a little extra thing caught down here. But the bit that was grabbing our attention was this dark line, nice strong diagonal, but that strong diagonal is leading our line down to this bright patch here. And the bright white here isn't really what the photo's about. So what you've got is you've got a strong leading line taking us down to a bright white patch, which isn't what the photo is about. What you've told me the photo is about is this patterning on the wall. So therefore, that's kind of where you want to be thinking here, is that when you're composing a photo, you need to think about where is the eye being drawn to, and is the eye being drawn to the place you want it to be drawn to. And a bright area is always going to catch the eye most, unless you've got a really light photo, in which case it's the dark area. It's the place of contrast, really, which tends to grab the attention. So if you're not sure what's grabbing your attention, that little trick, blur it, turn it upside down, see what grabs your attention. That's a really kind of good shortcut for understanding how it's working. So what I would say with something like this is part of the, you go back to this problem of really you start at a different place. To improve this, part of the problem, I mean, what I might do is I might kind of crop in a bit to try and get rid of a lot of the bright patch here. So we do something like that. We've still got a light patch catching in the corner. Perhaps at that point I would just kind of edit that bit out. At this point though, we're still getting the light hitting the bottom of the stairs, so that's where our attention is all getting grabbed to the bottom of the stairs. But it was the wall that you were interested in. Ultimately, I think what you needed to have done, if it was the wall that you wanted, then go in and take a photo of the patterns on the wall. Have a nice bit of abstract, have a nice little crack running along the bottom. Or you're trying to kind of create something, a composition, which draws your attention to the pattern on the wall. And unfortunately, with the composition that you've got with the existing photo, it doesn't draw your attention. The pattern on the wall is just a background to the stairwell, taking you down to that bright white where the light is coming in through the entrance. So I hope that gives you a few ideas, Subha, kind of to sort of start playing with or to start thinking about that photo. But thank you for sending that one in. I hope you found that useful. Right. Okay, what else have we got? Diane says, thank you. Subha says, very true, practice makes perfect. Stacey says, so basically balancing colour, balancing lighting, yes. Wall is great, but what I see is the colour and the diagonals, absolutely. And Subha says, right, okay, the point comes across. Good, really glad. All right, okay, now, slight little, so I will say, I realise I'm kind of running out of time here. For those who are interested, there was an interesting question by Roy that was put into the Facebook group about getting filters stuck. So on the front of your camera, A lot of people will have filters, little things that you just stick on the top of the lens, and you can have UV filters, you can have gradiated filters, neutral density filters. There's a whole bunch here, and they quite often you can screw one on top of the other. And he managed to get one stuck and couldn't seem to get them out, and was kind of running into a few problems, asking for a few bits of advice. 3 people came back in with advice. John Painter, Rosie and Ursula all gave him different ideas of how to actually get that off if you're stuck. Like I said, I don't really have time to go into all those just now, but certainly if you're on Facebook, go and take a look, because there's some fantastic ideas. Just scroll down until you find that entry by Roy. So next up, what I want to talk about then is we're going to talk about April's photo. Now April sent in, where are we? This one. And what April said was, I finally got photo elements and I'm having trouble with colouring the backgrounds and making that nice background effect with shades of one colour. I'm trying to work out the steps for this. Here's a photo as an example. How would you put a lavender background around this flower with different shades of lavender? So, or even this. So basically, okay, let's go into this. Drag this into Photoshop for a moment. Let's really just close those other photos so we can see what we're doing. So what we've got then is so the question here is, we're not worrying about composition, we're not worrying about, you know, narrative or anything like that. The question here is about colouring the background. So April's not so keen on this sort of brownish background. I was wondering how would you kind of colour it in? And this, I'll just duplicate that layer, because part of the problem you're up against here is if I say select a nice little kind of lavender purple colour, and then I get the bucket tool and I pour it in, and it goes like this, and it just kind of looks a bit naff. It's not really working very well, and especially at the edges it gets very rough indeed. You're not getting a nice blend with it. So what else can you do? And really, I would say that if you're wanting to sort of change the background, now sometimes the background, what you would do is you would cut out and that, you know, create your background. So you might decide to, for example, supposing you wanted use a gradient map here, and let's do a front to back, and you might have a gradient like that, or let's do a circular gradient, or even something like that. So we've created a kind of purple to white gradient, and then now we've got that. How do you get, now what you might do is you might put a mask on that and then essentially slowly paint this back in, something like that. Or alternatively, we just try and we paint that in like that, and then we try and be a little bit more careful. We reverse that and then come back and then just sort of paint in. However, having said that, a bit like the kind of, it's actually very difficult to try and get a proper kind of overlap without it sort of overlapping, and you can spend hours and hours and hours and it's still not really going to quite look right. So another option here, and the option that's really crying out for with something like this, is to use the hue saturation tool. And what I mean by this, so if we go to, you will have something similar here. So on Photoshop, you go to hue and saturation. Now, what I can do here, if I grab the hue, I can move this and you can see everything changes colour. It's shifting, we're getting greens and purples and reds and blues and everything else. So the thing is, what's happening is everything in it is changing colour. So we've not just changed that to a blue background, the flower itself has become green. So the other thing to do then is to selectively change the colour. So in this case, what we're doing here, the closest kind of colour this is a kind of yellow. So if instead of master, I go to yellows, and then I drag the hue thing here, you can see that it sort of shifts that bit, but isn't really shifting the colour of the purples so much. And it helps because it's kind of at the opposite. So you can drag that over until you get to That's kind of gone to a green. I go this way through reds, and there I'm kind of getting to a purple level. It's not perfect, but you're kind of getting closer to it. We also have this problem of down in the bottom here, where it's overlapping a bit, that it's really got a bit funny. And at this point, this bottom level here, this is where you can kind of change the parameters a bit. If I drag that out a bit, if I drag that to the left, see that's now filling in where it was sort of, it's gone reddish there. I can sort of change those parameters and that sort of fills that in a bit. And if I move this way a bit, notice this bottom corner here, that starts to kind of flow a little bit more too. Now, if at that point, I then bring in a very soft brush, sorry, that needs to be black, and just very gently touch up the edges of that, then you don't end up with such a hard barrier. So this really, that's kind of the best way I can think of for this. You might still need to go in and play around and touch it up and all the rest of it, but in essence, if you're trying to shift just a colour, a section of and the background is relatively uniform, then using the hue saturation tool and selecting the colour that you want is probably one of the easiest ways of going about it. So I hope that helps, April. Right. All right. April said, that's scary, a stuck filter. And Roy says, I brought a filter wrench, worked a treat. Great. Okay. sounds like it worked well. Right. Okay. Let's now move on. So Roy, apart from his stuck filter, also sent in a photo and said, I saw this graffiti on a wall earlier in Blackpool. And so this is the photo that he's got. And it says, I like the way the side lighting had made the wire that's sticking out look from the wall look like a nose. I really like this image and think it could work well as it is. But think it works well as it is. But is there anything I could do to improve it? Okay. So what we have here then is we have a wall. The wall has been, it looks like maybe the wall was already sort of split with a white background or something like that. Somebody's put the usual suspects on it, put the height things here. So it's making reference to the film called The Usual Suspects, where you had a bunch of people in a police line-up line and they're all at different heights. And then what's happened is there's this wire, probably like an aerial wire or something, running down the middle here. And although the wire itself, there's a kink in the wire, which isn't very big from straight on, but because the light's coming from the side, the shadow has created much more of a bit coming out of here. So now the question I would say to you, Roy, here is what is it that you're actually photographing? Because in a way, there's the interesting bit of this on one level is the fact that you've got the usual suspects and you've got this 6'6", 6 foot, 5 foot 6, 5 foot coming down here. But what you've said makes it interesting is the nose type shape over here. And that doesn't seem particularly related to anything else is going on here. So in a way, what I think you run into here is essentially a narrative problem. It's deciding which narrative becomes important. If it's about the usual suspects, what would enhance this would be to have some people standing against it, or maybe somebody walking past pushing a pram. To actually catch some kind of person, or actually somebody walking a couple of dogs, or two people walking in opposite directions, where you can see what their height is, but they're also essentially, while they are just strangers walking along a street, you are grabbing them as, like they're part of a lineup as such, a police lineup. So I think something like that could be a fun kind of thing to do with the narrative. However, what you've concentrated on is the kink in the wire. And that actually has nothing to do with any of the rest of it. So if that's the important bit, what I would say is this bit that I keep talking about, which is understand what the narrative is and then look for ways of enhancing that narrative. So if it's all about this, then what we really want to do is we want to go here. This is the important bit of the story. Now, rather than putting it in the centre, we'll go a kind of rule of thirds. Because we're doing a rule of thirds and it seems to be pointing to the right, we'll have more space on the right than the left. I'll do a content aware and I'll just stretch that out a little bit and then hit enter. So now it's just about the wall and the shadow. Now, at this point, what also happens is we become aware that it looks a bit dark to me. So what I will do, let's just get the levels bar. Yeah, I can see there's a big gap on the left, on the right here. So I'm going to move that over to the left, and that kind of brightens the wall up a little bit. Maybe touch that down a little bit here, so that not too much actually. And the other thing is that it's starting to slant down a little bit. So I'll just duplicate that level, and then I'll transform and just grab. Holding down the control button, I can then drag this bit up a bit and just level out those bits there. So that now I'm not getting distracted by the fact that the wall seems to be turning down. It looks like a flat wall. So now if I do something like a brightness and contrast, maybe even up the brightness a little bit more, boost the contrast a little bit maybe, and now that shadow stands out a touch more. Kind of got to be careful here though, because it's also boosting the contrast of these lines across here. So we've got to be a little bit careful about whether that's actually, how much is it improving and how much is it detracting from the narrative you're trying to tell. So there's a little bit of, I mean, I'm doing this very quickly. I would expect you to take a little bit more time about it. But if you're talking about this now as part of your story, your narrative is, what you have is you have the wall and then suddenly you have this shadow coming out. So now we're into a kind of minimalism level of thing. And actually, because it's a white painted wall, maybe with a little bit of orange in there, we can go to your favorite thing and change it to black and white. And I think it probably works slightly better, so that little bits of fraction of orange, which weren't enhancing the photo, but were kind of detracting from a little bit, just get removed. So I think really, Roy, if what really you liked about it was the odd shadow that suddenly leaps out about it, you want to do something like this. It's about the shadow. So make sure that the wall behind it is, you know, all that stuff with the usual suspects was completely detracting from it. It wasn't giving you the narrative you want. Or what you were doing was setting up competing narratives. And that's never really much good for your photography, because people are not sure what it is they're supposed to be looking at. Like I say, if you wanted to go down the usual suspects thing, then catching people as they're walking past would have been another option on that. But I hope that gives you a few ideas there, Roy. Okay. Oh, Meg says it's a really interesting photo, Roy, and April likes the shadow. Okay, last one then I'm going to talk about before I tell you what's coming up next week is Nurije. So Nurije sent us, where are we? This photo of a bluebell. Says, I haven't had a chance to get out and take photos recently due to being very busy at work. And today was the day, and it's only taken me a year to get to this place. Took a few attempts to find it because the sat nav kept getting me completely lost. By the time there, it started getting dark. So Nurije's given us a great long talk about why the problem's getting this photo, but didn't actually ask me what it is you want, what kind of feedback it is you're wanting about the photo. Bluebells, I absolutely love bluebells. You've got a narrow depth of focus here, so we've got these echoes of bluebells in the background, and we've got the one in the foreground that's in focus. So first off, yep, great. You know, you're onto the right kind of realms here. You managed to isolate the bluebell against the background. Could it be better? Or what else could you be looking out for? Now, my feeling with this is that it tends to be a little bit too vertical, really. Although there's a little bit of diagonal coming here and a little bit of diagonal going the other way. These ones, that you've got the flower coming up, but that's fairly horizontal, and then they've got these other flowers that are drooping down. So it's almost right angles. And I think when you're talking about flowers and nature, you really want to introduce more in the way of diagonals. I think you ideally go back and look for different flowers, try different flowers out, and get ones that are sort of opening and drooping or turning down, pointing downwards, and look for more diagonals within it. But just to give you a quick idea of what I mean by that is, now the problem is with this is actually trying to rotate the whole thing at the level that I want is going to, it's not really going to do it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just briefly cut this out, paste it, and then what I can do with it is I can transform. I can actually, no, before I do that, then what I do is on the one underneath, I'm just going to remove so that all we've got is a background. So I'm just using the patch tool And hopefully that should just sort of match up the background into it. So there we go. We've essentially got the thing, and now we can place this back on top of it. Now what I'm going to do is I can rotate this a little bit, and if I could rotate it that way, does that look better? Do I do it that way? That way I don't like so much. It feels like the whole thing's falling over because the flower itself is pointing down. So maybe what I would do is sort of take it something a little bit more like that. Maybe that's a bit too far, not sure, but I quite like the idea of having diagonals. So you've got a diagonal going up the way, you've got diagonals coming down the way. Like I say, this isn't absolutely perfect, and I wouldn't really I'd recommend you took a different photo rather than this. But again, I will just mask this, and I will just take out the edging here so that it's not quite so obvious. But just to give you that kind of idea. And I think really then, this kind of photo is maybe giving you something a little bit more, but it's primarily really what I'm talking about though is this notion of the introduction of diagonals into wildflowers. And I think certainly with bluebells, try and avoid any which are going directly horizontal or flowers that are going vertical, especially if they're pointing downwards. I think if you can introduce diagonals and what have you, it will absolutely transform. We've talked a lot about diagonals before, and I think if you go back, you try and find different bluebells, try and find the ones that have got the shape that are really interesting there. I love the fact that you've got the background is out of focus and that you've got all these lovely echoes of the purple in the green. I think that works really well. I think really this comes down to just choosing the right photo. So I hope you find that one useful, Nurije. Right, okay. Excuse me. A couple more comments then. Roy says, thanks, I will return one day and wait for a passerby. Stacey says she loves the bluebells. And Nurije says, yes, composition, cropping. Right, okay, cool. Oh, I know where the place is, so I'll be going there again next year. Excellent. Can you get back there before next year? Can you get back there this weekend? I think the bluebell should still be around for a couple of weeks. You might be all right. Right, okay. That brings us to the end of that section. So what I want to just say now is to talk about next week. Next week, based on the fact that we've been talking a lot about the competitions, what I would like you to do is send me your photos which you think should do better in the competitions. After everything we've been talking about, we all have the photos where we're going, I like this photo. I think there's something good about it. Why isn't it scoring well in the competitions? Now, hopefully I've given you some ideas, but for all the fact that it's ideas, when you look at your own photos, sometimes it's that much more difficult. So next week, send me the photos. Either go to the Facebook group, Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, or email me, kim@kimayres.co.uk. And next week, essentially, will become a kind of sort of extended critique version. But what I will essentially do is we'll go through the photos that you send me, and I will try and help you to understand either what you could do to improve the photo, or at least give you a little bit of an understanding about why that won't work in certain competitions, or to understand even what kind of competitions that photo would work better in. So dig out your favourite photo that you love, you put into the online competitions or any competitions, but it just doesn't do well. That's what the theme is for next week. And try and get your photos into me by Friday at the latest, because otherwise I kind of have problems. There's a time limit for me. And also this week I've got a particularly busy week on. So don't leave it too late to send me the images. And then the following week we'll be back into something and do a normal critique section. But for next week, your favourite photo that doesn't seem to do so well in photo competitions. Like I say, if you've enjoyed this, found it useful, would like to contribute and support these podcasts, buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is one of the ways you can do it. Hope you found this useful. Invite your friends as well. Let them know all about it. And look forward to seeing you all next week. Take care. Bye-bye.